off the track.
Alright, good morning everybody, it's your boy Akin and welcome to today's vlogs. Here to give you my draft grades for each team for the selections of the 2017 NFL Draft. For this vlog, I'm here to talk about all the teams of the NFC North division, starting things off. And I'm going to start things off with the Chicago Bears, who had an interesting draft, especially with their first pick. Decided to trade up just one slot, then traded with my San Francisco 49ers with their first pick and number 2 overall selection in Mitch Trubisky, quarterback coming out of UNC. Now, I do like this pick a little bit because they're looking to get a future quarterback, despite the fact that they did sign Mike Glennon to a multi-year contract from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's not looking good for Mike Glennon because he thinks this was a bad choice for them. He was a little bit upset of the selection, but I do understand because I do think that Trubisky does have a chance to become a good a quarterback for the Bears in the near future. Now, the second pick was in the second round. They actually went with Adam Shaheen coming out of Ashland. And this kid has a lot of speed for a man of his size at 276 pounds. He does run in the 4.6, 4.7 range in the 40. And then their next pick wasn't until the 4th round, in which they did need help in the secondary, particularly at safety. And they did select Eddie Jackson coming out of Alabama. Now, hopefully this kid stays healthy. That is going to be key. Some people did have their eyebrow raised with this selection. They could have went with other safeties, but this kid can play, but he just needs to stay healthy. He did battle a lot of injuries in college football. Next up, in the 4th round, they went with Terry Cohen, the running back coming out of North Carolina A&T. Now, we all know that Jordan Howard, it looks like he's going to be the star at running back, but they could definitely use Cohen's help, particularly in going towards the second half of the games, in which he could definitely be effective against tired defenses, which is key. And he could also be in good use in special teams. He could be used a lot like Darren Sproles of the Philadelphia Eagles. And with their final selection in the 5th round, they went with Jordan Morgan, the offensive lineman coming out of Cookstown. I think this kid does have a lot of talent. He did play against the lower division, but he was one of the baddest offensive linemen in his respective division. I think he is a good talent and he should make the team. Now, overall, I think this team, I have to give them a B for their efforts with their selections. They had a pretty good pick, but I'm actually going to give them a C for their efforts. They actually did not have to do what they did and trade with the San Francisco 49ers and lose selections. That was not a good idea. I think that John Lynch, RGM for the San Francisco 49ers, did a great job actually kind of fooling the Chicago Bears. My Niners did not want Mitch Trubisky. They did not have him on the draft board with the second pick. They were either going to go with Solomon Thomas of Stanford or Reuben Foster out of Alabama, in which they actually selected both those two players in the 1st round. Chicago did not have to do what they had to do, and with their first selection and trading up, that was a bad idea. So for those efforts, I'm going to have to give them a C. But for the picks overall, I'm actually going to give them a B. Next up is the Minnesota Vikings. I think they had a pretty good draft. Now, they didn't get their first pick until the 2nd round, in which they did pick up a great running back out of Florida State and Dalvin Cook. He was actually one of my top 3 overall running backs entering this year's draft. This kid is a sheer talent. Reminds me a lot of a bigger version of Warrick Dunn. Has better size, great speed, and I do like the fact that he is a great receiver coming out of the backfield. In the 3rd round pick, they went with Pat Eflin coming out of Ohio State. I think this was a good selection as well. He's a good little bit of a doozy, but I think he will find a great slot at the center position. I think this kid is a good talent out of Ohio State. Next up, they picked up another talented player coming from the Big Ten Conference, and Jaleel Johnson, the defensive tackle coming out of Iowa. They're looking to have some good young depth at defensive tackle. I think this was a solid selection. Next up, still in the 4th round, they went with Gideon coming out of Michigan. Now, this kid was a late bloomer, did not really get too much of experience. He didn't finally start until his senior year, but we will see. I do wish him the best of luck. They picked up a pretty decent player for the special teams in Rodney Adams, the wide receiver coming out of South Florida. I think he will be an effective special teams player. Sticking in the 5th round, they went with Danny Isidore coming out of the U. He is a guard to help address more in the offensive line, and I think this was a great selection. Also, a pretty good selection was Bucky Hodges, a 6th round pick coming out of Virginia Tech at tight end. I thought he should have been picked a little bit sooner, but hey, this is still a good pick for the Vikings. It's kind of somewhat of a sleeper at tight end. And in the 7th round, they actually had picked 4 picks, and I do wish all these guys the best with their luck in their team and trying to make the team. And Stacy Coley coming out of the U, wide receiver. They picked up a defensive lineman for Northwestern and Ifedi Odemnibo, and Elijah Lee coming out of Kansas State, the linebacker, and Jack Tacho, the cornerback, coming out of NC State. Out of the 4 players, I do see Coley and Tacho actually making the team. I do wish the other players the best luck, as well as the remaining players who were selected previously. Now, overall for this team, I'm actually going to give them a B+. I kind of like their picks, particularly in the earlier selections. I think they had a good job building up more depth and trying to address every area of needing special teams, defense, and offensive. I think they had a good job. I have to give them a B+. Next up is the Green Bay Packers. I think they had a solid draft themselves, particularly trying to address things on the defensive side. They do have pretty much all they need on the offensive side, except at running back. But they went with their first pick in the 2nd round. They didn't get the first selection till round 2. And Kevin King, the cornerback coming out of Washington, thinks it was a great selection. Next up was safety Josh Jones out of NC State to address the secondary. I think this was a great selection as well, and I think he could complement and Quentin Dent. Next up is defensive tackle and Montravis Adams coming out of Auburn. I think this was a good pick to address the defensive line. They picked up a pretty good outside linebacker out of Wisconsin. They had a slew of great linebackers for the Badgers this past season, and Vince Beigel. And in the 4th round, that's when he went offensively and went with a running back in Jamal Williams coming out of BYU. He actually had a couple 1,000-yard seasons for the Cougars, particularly in this past season. He did average 5.9 yards per carry. Next up is in the 5th round was D'Angelo Yancey, the wide receiver coming out of Purdue. Now, they have a lot of depth at wide receiver and a lot of wide receivers. I think this was a little bit of a wasted pick. He is a pretty talented player, but I don't think they could have went with him. In the 5th round, they had Aaron Jones coming out of UTEP. Now, I think this is a pretty good running back. He did have 1,000 yards this past season. So they're looking to build up more competition at running back, as I see. They picked up Kofi Amichia, offensive lineman coming out of South Florida. I think this was a good pick. And in the 7th round, they actually picked up some solid, valuable players in the 7th round, and Malachi Dupree, a wide receiver coming out of LSU, and Devontae Mays coming out of Utah State. I think that Mays can be somewhat of a sleeper at running back, but I think he will be used in 3rd down situations for the Packers. If he makes the team, they do have a lot of running backs who's trying to prove themselves for the Packers. It's going to be hard to determine who will be that starting back coming towards week 1. Now, overall for the Packers, I'm going to also give them a B+ as well. I do like their selections overall. I do like the fact that they try to address running backs as well. I think they had some good players to pick up. I do like Adams, in my personal opinion, as well as Jamal Williams. Now, lastly is the Detroit Lions. Now, I have to talk about them. Lastly, I think they had an okay draft as well. I'm actually going to give them a B overall. Starting with Gerard Davis, their 1st round pick coming out of Florida. They were in dire need at linebacker due to the fact that DeAndre Levy is no longer with the team. So Gerard Davis is going to be that sure replacement, and he should start at week 1. They did need some help in the secondary, in which they did address it in their 2nd round pick. And Tez Tabor coming out of Florida. Now, there's some concerns for him entering this year's draft because of his 40 time. He ran a 4.6 and a 4.7, and both the scouting combine and his pro day workout combined was not looking too well. Next up was Kenny Galloway, the wide receiver coming out of Northern Illinois. He was their 3rd round selection. Now, they were in need at wide receiver, cornerback, and linebacker. So, obviously, with their first 3 selections, they went directly on what they needed to address the offense. They also needed a tight end, which they did pick up in the later rounds. They went Jalen Reeves, Maven, out of Tennessee with their 4th round selection. Now, he did have 2 straight 100-tackle season. Now, his numbers did drop last season. He actually missed, he only played 4 games this past season. Next up is Michael Roberts. He is the tight end that they selected coming out of Toledo. Now, he's more of I think he could be used more as a blocker. He did have over 500 yards receiving this past season. We will see. I don't see him as a big receiver. Next up is Jamal Agnew out of San Diego. He was the cornerback who they selected in the 5th round. Now, this was a pick that I actually loved. He had a 4.6 40. He has great speed, great agility, and the reason why he dropped to the 5th round was because of his size. He is only 5'9", which is short for a cornerback. So he's going to be struggling against bigger, taller receivers, and that's why he dropped, because he is vertically challenged. Had he been like 6'2", he could have been. I think he could have been a 2nd round selection. Next up, they went address the defensive line and Jeremiah Ledbecker coming out of Arkansas in the 6th round. He actually had 54 tackles and then 49 tackles in 2015 and 2016 respectively. And in the 6th round, they picked up Brad Kaya out of the U. Now, this was a great, valuable selection to be a good, solid backup for Matthew Stafford. We will see. Pat O'Connor was their final selection. He was another defensive lineman coming out of Eastern Michigan. He's going to be battling out with Ledbecker to see who will make the team. Both these 2 players respectively had some good, solid seasons. Now, overall, like I said, I'm going to have to give the Lions a B. I think they had this whole NFC North division had a pretty good draft class overall. Now, the next time I'm going to catch you guys will be in just a couple minutes. I have more blogs for today. Thank you for watching this blog. I'm your man, Akin McCall. BE.